let's get the evening started. I'm going to hand it over to a longtime friend of the museum, a longtime TV and radio broadcaster, a native of Liberty, Indiana, and I'm proud to say in about 24 hours will be one of 2 brand new inductees into the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame. Bob Jenkins.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you for the mention of Liberty, Indiana. It's only 1,800 people over south of Richmond, and actually it's a suburb of Richmond on the north, Connorsville on the west, Brookville on the south, and Miami of Ohio, Oxford, Ohio on the east. So, you know, a town of 1,800, but it's still suburbs, those other metropolises. And thank you for the mention of the Hall of Fame. I don't get nervous doing stuff like this because these guys are so easy to work with. Tomorrow night will be a different thing because it is without question the highest honor I have ever received and ever hope to receive. And I thank everybody for making it possible for me. So if you're there tomorrow night, you will see a very nervous person, more so than I've ever been for any television program that I've ever done. Let's get the festivities started, huh? I grew up in Liberty in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and became a race driver early on. And the names of race drivers to me, especially those at the Indianapolis 500, were just magic to me. And there's not a more magical name in all of auto racing than Andretti. And tonight we have the patriarch of the Andretti family with us, who has done everything in auto racing. And now he serves as one of the greatest ambassadors of auto racing, and especially the Indianapolis 500, that you could ever ask for. Please greet warmly Mario Andretti. We'll move up on stage here in just a minute, Mario, but we have a special presentation for you before we get things started. So would you come up, please, from the back of the audience, and we'll have a very special presentation for you. Oh, here he is coming on the right. Guess who? Ladies and gentlemen, Bobby Unser.
What's your name? I forgot. This is my personal WAP, the only one I got in this whole wide world, you know? And he's been my WAP for a long time.
Some flowers and some chocolate.
Now, the other night, just so all of you know what this is all about, I was supposed to be here, but I took a vacation downtown to the crash house. And so I called him up, and he's all pissed off because I didn't show up for his deal. So now we brought him flowers, we got him hot chocolates, or not hot chocolate, chocolates. Dark chocolates. Yeah, yeah. And you got to eat them. You're going to get more on your tongue.
A lot of that for your energy.
I do.
Boy, you know, and chili too. Got some chili. Some chili.
Chili chocolates.
Chili, you know? Chocolate.
He doesn't know where that is or what that is because of where he comes from, you know. But that's all right.
Did you pick these flowers today?
No, I didn't. You know I didn't do that.
I know you did. I know you did. You just don't want to admit it.
Got the checkered flags
Look
on
at
it.
that. Oh my
I don't know
goodness.
what the heck they are, but they sure look pretty.
Even wrap this. Oh my God.
Yeah. Now what do you got to bitch about? You got nothing else to bitch about.
It's not even Father's Day yet.
Well, thank you, Bobby, for the surprise. I'm sure that Mario really appreciates it.
I had last year when I was here, probably none of you were here, but yeah, well, that's good. The good guys were here. So at any rate, I'm
There's about 5 people here, though.
Yeah. So I'm over leaning up against something, and I looked out there, and the guy Stern Wap had walked in. And I thought, wow, that's funny. It's my deal, you know. So he came up, and of course, jarred me loose every way, told me all the things I didn't know, which we've been doing for years, you know. At any rate, this year's my year to get back. But I did screw up the other night, so now you got no more bitches. I came, and I made it, and I'm here, and you got flowers.
It was a great photo op for anybody.
Mario was my absolute best friend in this world for many, many years, you know. We ran together. And I can't tell you all the things we did because you guys would get embarrassed and the girls would get embarrassed, so I got to be kind of right, okay? At any rate, congratulations. Wow. Good to see this. You didn't think we'd make it this long, did you?
You can go back to the hospital now.
Bobby, thank you so much. We'll give the flowers to somebody over here on the right so we can get going with the program tonight. Somebody take the flowers from Mario. All right, I'll give you this mic and I'll use this one and we'll go up on stage. All right.
Okay.
All right. This display is awesome, isn't it?
This is phenomenal. I tell you, the Thursday morning before the Grand Prix, that's the first time that I had a chance to see it. And I was just blown away. It's the only way I can say it. It's amazing the amount of work that they did on all the details. And I mean, stuff like this just doesn't happen. And you know, there's so many of the owners of these cars that voluntarily, you know, donated. Some obviously were approached, but others that they heard that, you know, there was interest in displaying them, and they just donated them for, you know, they'll be here until November, actually. So, again, I'm so grateful to the Speedway and the museum, everyone that has worked on this, and I don't know I'll ever be able to pay them back. Again, it's been a great, I mean, it's amazing every single day, something great happening, and it's been so much fun this month. Believe me, I'm taking it all in, and you know, it was really interesting. You know, Mike Tirico, I was saying that he's obviously going to be the main man, you know, for the broadcast for NBC. And you know how versatile he is. You know, he's been in the Olympics, and he just recently the Kentucky Derby. And I picked him up. He came in from New York, and I picked him up at the airport on a tarmac with a two-seater, and it was raining. It was raining, and I said, and we had a Corvette pace car there as well. So I said, Mike, I said, I'm willing to get really wet. I said, are you? He says, if you're in, I'm in. And from there we drove with a two-seater up 465 all the way into the racetrack, right up to the yard of bricks, and I even made him kiss him. So
That's great.
you know, always something different going on every day, and we have a lot more to look forward to, even just before the main event.
Well, let me just give you one example of how important and how gracious he has been this month. On Mother's Day, Sunday, he strolled into the museum here, and with Sharpie in hand, and signed autographs and had pictures taken virtually all day. Not invited, he just wanted to come and be close to the fans. And I don't think there's anything else you can say that shows it all the way Mario Andretti is.
I mean, that was very selfish anyway, you know, to come in. I wanted to take it all in, and of course, I didn't think there would be that many people, otherwise I wouldn't come, you know. I'm only kidding.
I don't want to start this thing on a down note, but I do want to get your reflections upon another great racer that we lost just in the past few days, Niki Lauda, whom you competed against in Formula One. Tell me about Niki briefly.
Well, obviously, you know, the multi-world champion, but we raced together, you know, back in the 70s. And in fact, I don't know if any of you know about the terrible accident that he had in 1976 at the Nürburgring. And I was one of the second car to arrive there. I was a couple seconds behind him. And I was driving the Parnelli, actually that car right there. And anyway, the track was blocked because you know, he crashed and there was a big fire, and so there was Arturo Merzario, the Italian driver, and myself. We ran over to pull him out of the car and so forth, and he had the incredible burns, you know, on his face and so forth. And anyway, he survived that one. 6 weeks later, he was back in a race car. And I mean, you know, his eyes and everything, you know, the eye sockets all burned. And we were in Japan, and it was probably the wettest race, certainly, that I've ever been in. It was like a deluge when we started the race. And as drivers, we asked if they could delay the start of the race for at least, you know, like 30 minutes or something to let this thing blow by. And the organizer said, no, it's on TV, and we got to go. But anyway, with him, he was going for the World Championship. That's why he just really, that was the last race of the season. And he just wanted to be in it and fight for it. And of course, with, you know, when it rains in a race car and you're anywhere in the field, like, unless if you're leading, your visibility is like maybe 50% at best. When you're behind, it's 10 to 20%. Believe it or not, you're almost driving blind. And he was, you know, he was in the back, not in the back, but you know, there's a couple of rows in the back, and then he was tearing so bad because, like I said, still he was not, you know, certainly not fully recovered, and he pulled in. He pulled in, and I respected him for that. I think he showed more courage by doing that because he showed, you know, good sense. He figured he wanted to live another day, and he lost the championship by 1 point, believe it or not. But again, we talked about it, you know, over the years, and the thing that I admired about this man is that obviously he used that example to advance the cause of safety in our sport. Not only the cars, but also the tracks, the circuits. And things were slow in coming along, you know, with as far as, you know, giving us a better chance to survive situations. And he was right with us, and that's when we organized. With Jackie Stewart and Niki and myself, we organized the Grand Prix Drivers Association, GPDA, which actually spilled over to Indy cars as well. And that was only to promote the safety, because every safety feature in a race car is a performance penalty, which means it's either weight or aerodynamic. So it has to be legislated into the rules, so every car has to have it. And that was always a big job to try to get the sanctioning bodies to buy into that. And also, so it was a gradual thing, you know, that the safety aspect of it, that, you know, it picked up a lot of momentum over the years, but he was one of the pioneers to actually use his example of what happened to him as to how to contain fire, for one thing, and on. And also, you know, some of the circuit, like the curbing, you know, where he got caught out was a very high curb. And now there's a standard for curbing, you know, in the road courses anywhere the Formula One drives, you know, including our own Grand Prix course right here. And you know, things like that we've come a long way, you know, and today, I mean, it's, I said this, and I'm knocking on wood, but today's drivers have the best chance ever, you know, to retire on their own terms. I mean, probably 99% chance. And in our days, well, I mean, I drove until, you know, the late 90s, but in the 60s, 70s, especially, we only had maybe a 30% chance of doing that. So we've come a long way, and quite honestly, I'm not sure, I don't think the sport would have survived as it became more commercial unless safety was really dealt with very vigorously. And today, like I said, it's very responsibly dealt with by every sanctioning body. I know that and Indianapolis was always at the forefront, always, all along, as far as providing, you know, like proper walls. And then they were the first track ever to put energy-absorbing walls near the safe walls. And I tested those, by the way.
Yeah, we remember that.
Tested in 2003 when they just installed it. But and that, it's amazing, you know, what that does. You know, that under severe impact, you know, what that, you know, how that really minimizes, you know, the potential of, you know, just serious injury.
And the Hans device, which prevents in many ways the basal skull fracture. There would be many race drivers alive today.
The Hans device, actually, one of my biggest fears that I had for injury was to break my neck and just become, you know, paraplegic or quadriplegic and so forth. That would have been, you know, and the Hans device actually is what helps prevent that, because it's the big snap that actually breaks, you know, that injures your spine. So, you know, there was, like I said, there's so many things that are out there now that really do help some of these drivers. I mean, we've seen drivers like, you know, Sam Schmidt, that's what happened to him, you know, in a backward crash, you know, and that's it. He became a quadriplegic. And so, you know, it's not 100%. Nothing is 100%, but it's big help.
And Tony George has been at the forefront of both of those innovations, by the way. This sprint car over here, speaking of lack of safety, it doesn't look like it has very many safety elements built in.
Well, you know, they thought I was short, but not that short, you know, because actually it had some kind of a roll bar, a little bit of a piece of little roll bar when I drove it. And that was the worst piece of shit I ever put my hands on. It was really, I mean, I was really desperate, I tell you. Right, it's a great race car at the time, but what I was driving against, you know, was amazing. And and they had a name on the side, was the guy by the name of some Ellis. And they never even put my name on there, even, you know, but which I was thankful, quite honestly. But you got to start somewhere, you know, and that was my first sprint car experience.
Now, I am a huge Roadster fan, and that Steerley Motor Express car is one of the most beautiful Roadsters I have ever seen. And that's where it all began to you, for you, in terms of championship cars.
Yes, indeed. That was my very first ride in a champ car, and I was in Trenton in 1964. And I already had a ride with Dean Van Lines, potentially promised. But this was a one-off, and what's interesting is that in those days, they only had one day, you know, like you practice, qualify, and race just one day. And I never had a chance to even sit in the car before I got there. And the guy that actually drove it before me was Troy Ruttman, who was twice my size, which is and I mean, I'm not kidding. And I was really, I mean, the seat was like, but the way this seat is, and I was afraid to ask for some padding because I figured that the kid just just get the hell out of here type of thing. So, and I didn't have much of a feel of the car, and then I got to tell you the story. Since I wasn't very familiar with Trenton, I knew where the top guys were backing off going into turn one, and I told my brother Aldo, I said, Aldo, go on the backstretch up to turn three. I knew there was a tree there. I said, I don't know where they're backing off back there. I said, but you just kind of stand where, the top guys are backing off. So I have some sort of a measure. And so I go out there, and man, I'm warming up, and I'm looking for him. I can't see him. And then finally, I'm going, and where the hell is he, So finally, by the time I saw him, backed off, and I spun. I didn't hit anything, luckily, Then later on, I said, Aldo, what the hell? I said, where the hell? I said, how far did you go down? Well, he says, here's where, Foyt and those guys are backing off. I went about 30 feet further. He said, if you're going to beat him, you can't back off where they're backing off. I said, yeah. So he almost killed me. I said, you turkey. So.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah, thanks, bro. So he was really trying to be very helpful. So that's my twin brother.
Well, in '65, you had your first win, as I recall. It was at almost Indianapolis, huh? Raceway Park?
Yeah, Raceway Park, actually. And, believe it or not, I was really lobbying for road racing, to get some road racing into the series, because we had dirt, the dirt tracks and the ovals, of course, and get road racing to make it, really, absolutely the most versatile series, which it still is, by the way, except for the dirt. But, and I was really vying for road racing because I wanted eventually to do some Formula One. And so I was really hell for bent on that one, and I won that race. Yeah, that was great. That was the only race I won that year, but we won the championship also. I was the youngest guy to do that, at that point.
And then it was on to the Indianapolis.
Yeah, Indy was, I was very, very fortunate that we just, thanks to Clint Brown and Jim McGee, my chiefs, that we chose the right car. Actually, they copied a Brabham, the rear engine Brabham, and actually Jim McElrath was driving that car, for John Zink, the Oklahoma, and they allowed us to copy that and made a couple, maybe potentially improvements, I think, as far as the chassis stiffness, and that car was magic for me right off the bat. As a rookie, I had never driven a rear engine car. I had never driven anything here at Indy in '65. In fact, the car was late. In those days we had 2 weeks before the first weekend qualifying. But by Wednesday of the second week, that was the last time that you could actually take the driver's test. And you had to have the driver's test before you could be allowed to go, fast. And the whole first week, nothing. The car was late, and you can imagine I wasn't getting much sleep. As a rookie, never been here, I figured everybody's running. I said, oh my goodness, I was really, really a mess. And the car arrived here on Tuesday actually. And I had just Wednesday, one day to get the test in. And I felt really comfortable right away in the car. And to pass the test that day, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And Jim McGee says, well, he said, no, we're okay. He said, now tomorrow we'll just get serious. We got Thursday and Friday, before qualifying. And I said, no, I want to go out tonight. And we went out tonight. We were second quick that day. I couldn't believe it. I said, I think maybe we got something here. And so it turned out to be, really a good situation.
Let's move on to 1969, and I remember this as well as I remember anything. Your crash of the Lotus I was thinking it was on the day before the first day of qualifying. Was Thursday?
That was Wednesday.
Wednesday, okay. I remember, though, wasn't there a huge flash of fire when you hit? Wasn't that caused by the magnesium?
Well, no, the tank split actually had a
okay.
huge fire. The car basically burned to the ground. If you look at, even on the documentary, they did show a photo. And the car, I mean, the car was still moving. I tried to jump out of it, you know, because, and I was lucky, you know, that I just had some facial burns. But, you know, that was a big crash because the right rear hub sheared. And of course, you know, hit the wall hard. But, you know, it was actually the best thing that could have happened because, and this, you know, and like I said, in those days, they had 2 weekends qualifying. The first weekend was rained out. And quite honestly, if we would have qualified the first weekend, I think I would have been on pole because we were setting records. You know, we were quick with that car. I mean, it's right in there. It's really was a fast car. But we had no idea, you know, that the thing was too fragile. And as we kept, you know, running more and more, obviously, then we were doing all the race setups. Then all of a sudden, not just our car, but the team cars, the Lotus car, Lotus had 2 cars in the race, I mean, in the show, like Jochen Rindt and Graham Hill, and I was driving the other, you know, for Andy Granatelli, you know, on our own team. And so they had some issues with the suspension, some stuff breaking, and Rink had a crash. And then when mine happened, they realized that they could not redesign the components that were breaking. And these were all components that were very critical. You know, you break a suspension, I mean, you're in trouble. And so they withdrew the cars. They had to withdraw the cars, just, you know, after my crash, 2 days before qualifying. We had a spare car, brand new. And so it was, and for us, it was, the moment was devastating because the Bronner Hawk that we have there, even though it was a new car that year, and I had one at Hanford a month before, you know, the race just before Indy with that car, it was never intended to be raced here. That was the 3rd car that was actually entered, technically even to just get an extra garage, because in those days, every car you enter, you get an extra garage. And and the car was not even race prepped or anything, you know. But anyway, we had 2 days to get the damn thing up to speed. And luckily, the car was better than we thought because qualifying, I put it in the middle of the front row next to AJ and Bobby Unser. And so that in itself gave us some hope, you know, that we could be competitive after all. And then it turned out to be the one to do it for us.
What a story. I mean, crashing the car that you were hoping to qualify and then getting in a backup car and winning the race. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Like, you know, the big satisfaction was even for Andy because we all know how hard he tried, you know, to win this race, you know, with the Novi's, and he always was something different because he only cared about this race. Andy did not field the car and for the rest of the championship. He only wanted to race here, and then he had the 2 years before that, you know, he had the turbine cars with Parnelli Jones, which almost won, and then the Lotus turbine cars, you know, the next year, which were on pole with Graham Hill, and then they almost won that race, but no cigar, you know, and so here we go, win it with the car that we never intended to race, you know. So we had our problems with the car. It was I couldn't believe that it lasted all day. You know, for some of you who are, you know, a little bit mechanically inclined, I was running 270-degree oil temperature. And I don't know how the hell that thing lasted, quite honestly. SDP oil too. That's what I said. I said I must have had more STP in my car than the other guys, which is probably true. But again, it went, and also, this is one for Firestone. We couldn't get the right. In those days, you know, we used to carry 80 gallons of fuel on board. So, you know, there weren't as frequent stops as you have today. And because of the nature of, you know, you had to knock off. You didn't have, you know, the power guns and everything else to change tires. You only programming maybe one tire change, at least one tire change. And we couldn't get the right rear off after the first stop. And so, and I just wanted to go. I didn't want to waste the time, and I'm going, you know. So, and then the second stop, the same thing. So I went 500 miles, you know, on that one tire. And if any of you have the program for this race, there's a letter in there. Oh, my wake-up call. Anyway, it's the same sound. On the program, there's a letter that I sent Firestone. It's still in their archives, to thank them for having a tire that has so much margin built into it, you know, to take me through the 500 miles. And that's a fact. But I was test driver for Firestone, so I had pretty good faith, you know, in that. But we never, ever went 500 miles on any of the test tires. So I had no idea. It just, but it did. It went.
I hope that you've all had a chance to not only see the cars, but to read about them. And the greatest quote in this facility is one that you had after being kissed by Andy Granatelli, and your quote was, "I can still smell the garlic."
Yeah, some of it is still there. Yeah, indeed. You know, there was so much happiness and euphoria in Victory Lane that, you know, and Andy obviously, he wore his emotions on his sleeve, you know, so he didn't know what to expect from him, but it was all good, you know. It was just phenomenal. I felt so good for, you know, so many of us. Even my chief, Clint Bronner, you know, he gave A.J. Foyt his test here, you know, and he had Jimmy Bryan driving for him and Eddie Sachs, and he was close, but he himself, with a long career, never won it, you know, so this was going to be his last race as his active chief, and here we go and win it for him, too, as well. So it was a lot of satisfaction, and like I said, not only for me, but around me, so that was fabulous.
And then under Formula One, was that something that you wanted to do and went for, or were you courted, so to speak?
No, Formula One is what I fell in love with, you know, as a young lad, because I was born and raised in Italy, and you know, back in you know, in the 50s, I was a teenager, and Formula One was so, you know, prominent there, because Formula One was born actually in 1950, officially, and was won by Farina, Nino Farina, Alfa Romeo. And then, of course, you had Ferrari, you had Maserati. So, as you could see, in Italy, it was a big deal. And my idol, the one that actually was probably inspired me the most, was Alberto Ascari, who actually tried to race here in 1952, actually, with a Ferrari. And but there was something about this dude that was really cool, you know, and just the way the press, you know, was representing him and so on and so forth, depicting him. And it caught my imagination, you know. There's always somebody that, you know, really, I want to be like him, you know, I want to be like, you know, that type of thing. And deep down, you know, when we came over in 55, I was 15, and then we started racing here. And deep down, as we went on, I figure, you know, there's plenty to do here in America, and of course the objectives was to get to the top level, Indy cars and so forth. And And always in the back of my mind, I said, I want to do Formula One. I want to dedicate part of my career to Formula One. And I can tell you, in 1965, when Jim Clark won in the Lotus, and I was third, and I got to know Colin Chapman and Jim Clark. You know, I made a business, you know, to get to know him. And after the banquet, we're saying our goodbyes, and I went to Colin. I said, Colin, I said, someday I would like to be in Formula One. And he says, Mario, he says, when you think you're ready, you just call me, and I'll have a car for you. And that's what I did in 1968. I called him. I said, I'd like to do the last 2 races. And I got to tell you that story because what's interesting is I wanted to do the Italian Grand Prix and then the U.S. Grand Prix. They were the last 2 races of the season. So I was in Italy, in Monza, and Watkins Glen. So I get a test 2 weeks before the Grand Prix of Italy, and I went there, and I felt so immediately, you know, really very at ease in a Formula One car. It was because up to then I had driven, you know, this sports prototypes. You know, I was in a part of the Ford program for the Le Mans program. Did a lot of road racing, and then in Indy cars we were racing also. But our cars, because of the nature, the rules, they're so much heavier. You know, the brakes. You know, and Formula One car is built only for road racing. So it's much lighter, much more nimble. When I was in it, I said, oh my God, I felt like I just belonged in it. And the test that we had in Italy was like a 3-day test, and Ferrari had tested it a week before, and I was quicker than Chris Amon in Monza, yeah, and I felt, you know, really good about it. And so, but there was a glitch. I was going for the championship in '68 here in Indy cars, and the Saturday of that same weekend, there was a Hoosier 100. So, and there was in those days they had a 24-hour rule for any international event. You cannot race an international event within 24 hours. So, and we all knew that. And so I said, okay, the promoter of Monza and also the head of the automobile club in Italy, Count Lurani, and the promoter, Bacigalupi, they all decided to waive that rule. So, so I had to qualify on a Friday morning. In those days, every time there was practice, they didn't have a specific qualifying period, you know, in those days. Every time you were on the track, whatever time you set, that was your qualifying time. So I only had Friday morning to qualify, to set a time. And in those days, you know, it was actually very useful in Monza, long straightaway, to do some slipstreaming. So I didn't think my teammates at Lotus were going to help me very much. And so I got Bobby Unser, Uncle Bobby. I got Bobby Unser a ride in a BRM, you know, so we could go back and forth and help each other. And at that time, you know, I set a decent time, but it was early, you know. But anyway, and we boarded a plane that afternoon, come to the States, and ran the Hoosier 100. Actually, I ran second to Foyt that day, which was a good day. And we went back. And we arrived there in the morning, and my car was on the grid, and we were there like 2 hours before the race, and I'm told that we're under protest. So I never found out exactly 100%, but I think Ferrari protested, and I was not allowed to be in that meeting, and Colin Chapman couldn't speak Italian, you know, so and I offered, I said, give us a quick physical, you know, just, and if you don't think that we're, you know, obviously up to snuff, you know, we won't do it. But, you know, we were good. And they did not let us start that race, believe it or not. But 2 weeks later, at Watkins Glen, I put the car on pole in my very first Grand Prix race. So I had very good, auspicious beginning in Formula One. And then I ran in Formula One. I quite honestly, I was so involved. In those days, there was a big tire war, if you remember, between Firestone and Goodyear. And it was very lucrative for us drivers, quite honestly. And so I could not leave the scene. And even Mr. Ferrari offered me a ride to drive, because I won my very first Formula One race in '71 in South Africa, driving for Ferrari. And then I won the Questel Grand Prix. It was a non-championship race on the West Coast. And all three of those races, because Questel Grand Prix had two 100-milers, and I won both. And Jackie Stewart finished second to all three of those races. So it was a good omen. I mean, Jackie Stewart was at the top of his game, you know, those days. And Mr. Ferrari offered me number one, you know, as a driver for the team, and I couldn't take it because, like I said, it just the earning power just wasn't there in Formula One in those days. But that's why I did it part-time until about 1975, when in '75 I talked to Val Pernelli-Jones, which is the car right behind you there, and a lot of the effort was funded by Firestone, actually, to do an American effort in Formula One. And we did, you know, I think the best finish we had was a fourth. The car, you know, was you know, not totally up to snuff, you know, but, and then in '76, they, and I committed to do Formula One at that point. I was doing part-time Indy cars on the weekends that, you know, in between, but because Formula One, you know, usually they race every 2 weeks. They never have a week after, you know, because of the travel to different countries or whatever. So in between, I would come to the States here and race here. But nevertheless, I'm on the grid with that car at Long Beach, which is, we raced South Africa, and then Long Beach was the second race. And Chris Economaki puts the mic to my face. I'm on the grid, ready to get started. He said, Mario. He said, hi. He says, what's your reaction on the fact that Val just told us that he's pulling the rug from under this program. This is your last race in Formula One. I couldn't believe it because, you know, we never discussed that. And so, I know, I said, man, I was so confused at that point. And I dropped out of the race. I think the rock or something went through my radiator and stuff. So I had a miserable day. And the next day in the morning, I was really, my chin was really in my socks. And I said, man, here it goes. And Colin Chapman had probably the worst day of his career with his cars. And believe it or not, I was having breakfast at the Queensway Hilton, right next to the Queen Mary. And he was a couple tables away all by himself as well. So I said, you know, join. I joined him. So misery loves company sometimes. And we started talking, and I said, you know, I'm out of Formula One now. I said, I don't have a ride. And he said, I wish I had a decent car to give you. He says, I'd love to have you. I said, if I join you, I said, would that be number one? Because I knew Lotus didn't have two best. He only had one best engine, one best something. So I said, if you put me number one, I said, I'll join you. And he said, my car is really crap. He says, I said, well, we'll make it better. I said, we'll work on it and we'll make it better. And the reason was that, you know, Colin Chapman was a genius, absolute genius. And at that point, he started a boat company, a car company, even there's a car on the other side. The car company still exists. So a lot of his time was taken away. You know, he was not concentrating in Formula One. And, and then we said, you know, I said, you got to come back racing, you know, and even his wife really liked the idea that I pushed that, you know, his wife Hazel. And so anyway, that's how we joined. I joined, and we got better and better during the season. I got a couple of podiums. And the very last race of the season in Japan, that was the race with the big deluge that we had, you know, we're talking about Niki Lauda. I was on pole there in the dry, and then the wet was, I tell you what, aquaplaning all over the place. But anyway, we just went, and I won that race. You know, so and that was a great omen, just nothing like winning the last race of the season to get everybody fired up. And I'll never forget the comment. He says, you know, he says, next year's car is going to make this one look like a London bus, you know. And so he was all in. And that's the history of Colin Chapman. If you look at his history, you know, it was, his career was peaks and valleys, you know, because, you know, the peaks when he was really right on, you know, because he was a genius, you know, always thinking outside the box. And, you know, it's just an engineer. The sport is regulated. You have a rule book. And it's the same thing as a lawyer reading the law. A good lawyer, what makes a good lawyer better than not so good a lawyer? That really understanding how to maximize the law. And that's where you win the cases. And race engineers the same way. You know, there's not everything in the rule book is black and white. And you got to know how to get away with the gray. And a good engineer knows how to push that envelope. And Colin was really marvelous for that. And that's the beauty. That's what, as a driver, that's what you want. You want somebody that can go out there and try to give you the most advantage possible, you know, to be able to perform. And you can't do it unless you have a car. I don't care how good you think you are. You got to have the equipment. So, I mean, and that's like a tool, you know. It's a tool that it's got to work for you.
I think it helps also to be one of the greatest race drivers of all time, but we have a special treat for you all. You will see on either side of you young men who are holding microphones, and that means that they will go through the audience and they will, if you will hold up your hand, we'll try to get to as many of you as possible, but we want you to fire off some questions to Mario Andretti. So let's get the hands up. Dave's over here, Eric's over here. Wow, good to see some hands popping up. Here we go.
I appreciate the young men.
Yeah, well, I almost changed that, but I thought, well, what the heck. You're younger than I am. Yes.
So with Bobby coming at the beginning of the program, could you talk a little bit about the 1981 race and your relationship with Bobby?
Next question.
You know what? I'm wearing the ring. And actually, I'm going to address it because, you know, with all due respect, I think there was an article here in early May that that race caused a big problem between Bobby's and my friendships. And I never blame Bobby or Roger Penske for trying to get the race back, even though they got it back illegally. And you gotta hear the facts. The facts are this. It was a good race for me in the sense that, you know, I was in Monaco, so I had Wally Dallenbach had to qualify the car for me, and I had to start last. And so we're coming down to the last pit stop, basically, and it was, and Bobby was running first, and I'm second. We're going in the pits and coming out of the pits together. The rule under yellow is the same today as it was then. If the field, when you exit in the pits, if the field is next to you, when you come out at the end of the wall, you look, and the car that you see, that's the car you blend behind when you come out of turn 2. And that's exactly what the field was alongside of us, and we come out of the pits, and I'm looking, my car, the car that I saw was, of all cars, was A.J. Foyt, and we're coming out, and I see Bobby. He accelerates, he goes right out, it comes out of turn 2, goes right behind the pace car. And I'm screaming, to Jim McGee on the radio. I said, what the hell's going on? I said, Bobby went all the way up behind the pace car. There was 11 cars between us. And so he says, stay where you are, And actually, if you look at even you can get on YouTube, they show that, and even Jim McKay and Jackie Stewart would say, you can't do that. They knew it. They can't do that. I mean, it's illegal, And so anyway, the race went on, and I had to pass 11 cars to get to him, and I finished up, a few seconds behind him. And so we were going to protest, obviously. And then, in those days, I think even today the race is not official until the next day anyway. But in those days, because of no computer, they go through all the tapes, and then a lot of the penalties, because everybody held their breath, they did anything wrong, and the penalties would come out the next day. And I get a call early in the morning, it was about 5 in the morning, from Jim McGee. He says, you won the race. He said they penalized him a lap, which is what the rule book says. So we went through all of the, the festivities and everything else and all that. Still have the ring. and you're allowed to appeal. And so Roger Penske brought in a very famous sports lawyer from Philadelphia. I mean, this dude, bushy hair, pinstripe suit, and sneakers, but he was very effective. And somehow he kept this thing rolling for 6 months. He had deposition after deposition and everything else. And he talked USAC, the sanctioning body, my beloved USAC, into allowing 3 judges. They brought 2 judges from outside, and they used Charlie Brockman, who was a famous radio personality here in Indianapolis. There were 3 judges to render the final, decision. And the 2 judges from the outside, they obviously thought that the penalty was too severe. Charlie Brockman abstained. He said, no. He said that rule book is rule book. And so the final decision was 2-1, that under the circumstances, this is the fact, this is the way it was written, under the circumstances, the penalty was too severe, so they fined him $40,000, and they reinstated him as a winner 6 months later. Now, this gets better. The following year at the drivers' meeting, I raised my hand at the end of the drivers' meeting, and I said, okay, this was Tom Binford, race director, and I said, Tom, just to get it straight, I said, any rule changes from last year? He says, nope. So hypothetically, if I pass 11 cars under the yellow today and cross the finish line first, is the fine still $40,000? He says, no. He said, Mario says, I penalized him. It's out of my, it's out of my hands. He says, I said, so the rule book will apply this year, but not last year, right? He said, well, nothing I could do. So that's the farce. I still to today, I blame USAC for allowing an outside force to totally disregard the rule book, which is what happened there. And that's a fact.
On a brighter note, Mario.
On a brighter note.
I think you said once that your first, the 1965 ride with Al Dean's team came after Chuck Hulse, I think it was, maybe lost his
Chuck Hulse was hurt, yeah.
And
yeah,
you
badly.
started your reputation or your relationship then with Jim McGee, and you and Jim were together for a really long time.
Yes.
Even through Newman Haas and so on. Could you talk a little bit about what it is that you two guys shared that made that relationship work so well?
Well, I think a lot of it was the age, you know, and I was so fortunate to have a veteran like Clint Bronner, you know, that with his experience and his wisdom, and then Jim McGee as a youngster, you know, coming on, very sharp, you know, already, but under the guidance of Clint Bronner. But he and I were a little more, you know, mavericks about things, you know, and Clint would cool us down a little bit, and so there was a perfect balance. It couldn't have happened any better for me, and you know, Jim and I got on, you know, so well. And you could see, I mean, the record that he has as a chief, you know, throughout his career. So, again, you know, things don't happen, you know, through luck. It just, the ingredients were there. These guys really, really helped me through. And quite honestly, the biggest thing sometimes is even Clint, you know, he was saying, man, I mean, bring this thing home and that type of, as fast as you're going to go, it's okay for us, you know. He said, don't try to overdo things. He was trying to kind of save my life, really, basically. And I think knowing that it was okay for me to just do what I could without trying to grandstand and do something stupid, which I did anyway sometimes. But it was great to have that, someone like that to calm me down. And so I had the best of both worlds, you know, with Jim and Clint, no question about it.
Yeah, Mario, I'd like to get your thoughts on the 1979 season. After you dominated in 78, how disappointing was that, and how bad was the Lotus 80?
Well, the Lotus 80 was a great car for 3 laps. It was, there's a point to this, because I described that car as a beautiful lady with a beautiful dress and with cancer, with a cancerous body, because here's the problem. The Lotus 80 was a big, I think, step forward in aerodynamics because it was better understood, but the chassis, the tub, was basically the same as at 79. And it needed to be much stiffer torsionally. And because we had to run much stiffer springs and everything else, and we would test, and the first few laps I would break a lap record, you know, and then it would get worse and worse. And I was trying to point it out, you know, because we were popping rivets on the spring, you know, and damper mounds and so forth. And you know, the car was great for a while. Like in the race, it was getting worse and worse and worse. I remember, you know, we had a decent finish like in Spain at Jarama and had fairly good curbs, so used the curbs a lot. And toward the end of the race, the car was unrecognizable. It was worse and worse. And so that's why we abandoned it. We couldn't use the downforce that it would provide, unfortunately. And as brilliant as Colin was, he would not accept any technical input from the drivers. The setup, yes. Setup we talk about, but if I would suggest to stiffen the tub and do none of that stuff, he would go ballistic, you know, and that was the thing. And that's unfortunate because I think the other teams, when they finally caught on to the ground effects features, they did all that. They had very stiff chassis. Williams did probably the best job at that point. And Colin by then had lost interest. He was already thinking probably his new design, which actually turned out to be illegal because he was trying to get downforce on the unsprung side of the car in a trick sort of way, which is the most efficient way, but and then it turned out to be that design was not accepted. But he would get bored. Colin was, like I said, brilliant, but he would get bored with that. He always on to the next thing. He didn't want to really perfect that idea. He was on to the next one that nobody else understood. You know, so that was his characteristic. Hope I answered the question.
Which racetrack always made you the most nervous when you went to it?
All of them. I never had a worst or a best. You know, I always I looked at every track the same way. My approach, I try not to prefer, because which meant that if the one I didn't prefer, I was already beat before I got there, and I tried not to have that attitude.
Linda Vaughn has a question. Having traveled almost all over the world with you, Mario, 2 of the Formula One races and Indy, and in all 50 years of being with you, I figured I could ask you one woman question. In racing women, who was the best woman driver that you competed with?
Now you're gonna put
on
me
the track.
Now you're gonna put me on the spot.
I wouldn't do that. We girls really want to know.
It was probably you.
So tell the story what happened when you did have to go back to Monaco and we put someone else in the car. That morning, Mario comes to me and goes, I hope you don't mind. I said, mind what? He goes, I just told the media I'd rather have Linda Vaughn drive my first lap of my race car.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
But the steering wheel, I had to take it off to get in the car.
And then you could put it on because there were some other issues.
Thank you, Mario.
Good question, Linda.
There were times when the race car drivers would race car rental cars. Could you have a few stories you'd like to say? And also, could you just mention Ronnie Peterson a little bit?
Well, Ronnie Peterson and I were, I think, great teammates and friends. You know, we spend a lot of time together, you know, off the track. The families bonded. That's something very special. It doesn't always happen with teammates. But I had known Robbie and befriended him Ronnie way before that. And, you know, it was one of the toughest situations, you know, by losing him the way it happened. He should not have died of those injuries, by the way. You know, he died from an embolism after. I mean, he was severe, you know, his legs and so forth. He had some burns, but he should not have died from those injuries, and that was the tragic part about it. He did not get the proper care at that hospital that he was in Milan, and that's a clear effect of, you know, and after that, you know, we demanded that we would have our own doctors in Formula One. Sid Hopkins, you know, we just said, you gotta be the one to determine, you know, which hospital, where we're gonna not have the track, you know, be part of this, and know who are gonna be the doctors that are gonna be care for us if we need them. And, you know, a lot of things change. Unfortunately, I always had to have a tragedy to have those changes, you know, but, you know, talk about Ronnie, and, you know, actually, Gunnar Nielsen was another, you know, guy from Finland. You know, I mean, from yeah, and we had some good friends from up in that part of the world. So, again, when you lose a friend, you lose a friend. Things are never the same.
Hi, Mario. Can you talk about, like, driving with Michael and how that was?
Well, he actually, you know, it was fabulous, you know, for a father. You know, I think it's, I don't think it ever happened. I don't think it ever happened before or since, you know, to have a father and son on the same team. And I had some reservations about it, you know, but, you know, Mike and I were very competitive. And I'll give you an example. I mean, in 1986, in Portland, Michael was leading, and I mean, he was dominating that race. And I was second, and there's no way I could have caught him. And I was, I think, like something like 10 or 12 seconds behind, right at 3 laps to go. And my engineer screaming in my ears, he said, Michael's having some fuel pickup problems. Man, I stood on that seat, that thing, and we're coming down for the drag race for the last lap, and his engine coughed, and I beat him by 2 inches, 7/1000ths of a second, and he was not happy, and it was Father's Day, and somebody said to Michael, he says, Michael, lighten up. I mean, it's Father's Day. He said, okay, Dad, happy Father's Day. But my wife, my dear wife, the answer is, Mario, couldn't you let your son, for God's sake? I said, Deanne, are you kidding? Since you brought that up, it's a record. I mean, it's in a record. Michael and I were on podium in an IndyCar race 15 times. 15 times. And we started on the front row 10 times. Can you imagine? It's 5, 10, and 15. And we were first and second 5 times. And unfortunately, he was first 4 times, and I was. He was first 4. He was really at the very top of his game. But we had a really great time together, and as a family, I'll expand on that. Just how phenomenal the sport has been to us as a family. In 1986, the same year, at Pocono, they had an Indy Light. It used to be ARS, so it's like Indy Light sport race. Like we'll have the Freedom 100 here on Friday, right? And my younger son Jeff was driving that race, and he was on pole for that race, and he won that race. Michael was on pole for the 500 at Pocono, and I won the 500. Between the 3 of us, we cleaned house in the weekend. And nobody paid any attention, but we did. And another time, it was John. It was in Milwaukee. I'm trying to think what year it was. I think it was 88 or something. Milwaukee, Michael was first. Nephew John was second. I was third on podium. So as a family, I tell you, we have. And 91 and 92, there were 4 of us in this race, which has never happened before or since, 4 members of the same family. So Indy and the sport has been phenomenal to us.
And don't forget, on Friday, another Andretti joins the mix.
Yeah, that's on my brother's side. We got 3rd generation, Jared. Andretti's driving in the Indy Lights. And he's been driving sprint cars, pretty regularly, USAC and so forth, and some outlaw stuff. And we're trying to get him on this side a little more, to prepare him for the Indy cars. He's really a good kid. He's a good head on him. And so we have a lot of skin in this game coming up this week.
Okay, let's take one more question. We have to move along. Yes, go
Mario,
ahead.
1969. Tell us a little bit about the horsepower of the cars back then. With no downforce, they had to be a handful.
Yeah, the cars were a handful indeed, because we did have. Right now, I think at that time, with the amount of blower pressure that we were allowed, we were racing with good 850 horsepower. And as you say, but you look at the size of the tires on that, the tires were much wider than what they're allowed today. So we had some good traction in that respect, but no downforce. And the cars qualifying, I love qualifying. And because you could just really, put that wastegate, wind that wastegate in. Qualifying, we were running like probably 150 more horsepower than we were racing. and you could only experience that qualifying because the engine was junk after that. So you didn't get a chance to try it in practice. So I couldn't wait to qualify because you're seeing revs that you had never seen throughout the week, you know, so the weekend. So, and yeah, I mean, to me, I just love horsepower. Obviously, every driver does. And those cars, I'm telling you what, and when that power came on, you better hang on. I mean, it was there. It was amazing. I love that.
Okay. Good. Sure.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, I was wondering, a couple Grand Prix ago, you raced Sam Smith in the Aero Corvettes. How much testing did you do before that? Because that was pretty awesome watching that.
Oh, wait, I know I cheated. And that one, here's the thing. I didn't get a chance, I didn't get a chance to do any laps on the track. So they said, but drive around the grounds, you know, there's a parking lot back on turn 4 and stuff like that. And you know, and those things, I mean, you gotta, first of all, you cannot steer. You know, the wheel just won't turn. And so to steer the car, it's by eyes and also by movement, you know, of your face. You know, you got you know, some of the things up on your forehead, and it's like got like some sensors, you know, that actually determine that. And then to accelerate, you blow in the tube, and to go on the brakes, you suck it up. So I tell you what, it was something else. Just to go around, you know, like I go over to there's one of those yellow shirts, you know, at the cross in one intersection, and the guy says like this, "You don't know how dead you are, buddy." You know, that's so, I mean, and then the biggest thing, I had to go down, you know how narrow the tunnels are. You know, I get the wall, I couldn't look at the wall, go, and then you see, then you get on the other side and you got the fence there, and you go, go up your turn, and you don't dare look at the mirror, because you look at the mirror, the car goes that way. So, and comes race day, you know, they said we got to do 4 laps. And I said to Sam, I said, oh, man, I said, he said, I know, because he was really good at it. He said, we'll jack around, you know, I'll make sure that I don't run away from you and stuff like that. So, and so I'm counting the laps and stuff like that. So, and he's waiting, you know, and I'm coming up and you know. So, and I kept looking. I was looking at turn 13, you know, where I could probably cheat cut it, you know, on the last lap, and like an idiot, I did that, you know. I cut through the grass, and that startled him, you know. So he got juked up, then he went off. And so we're coming down the straightaway, and I didn't want to look at the mirror because I would have crashed. I said, where is he? Because I wanted him to win, really. I mean, he needed to win. And then I don't see him coming, and I went, well, I blew. So I won the race, and I felt so bad because I felt like an idiot, you know. And I went over, I apologized to him. You know, he's a great sport, you know. And so they wanted to do it again, and I said, oh, no. I don't want to embarrass myself this time, you know. So, he could have run away, you know. It was really tough. I mean, you really, it's so sensitive. And, but your normal senses will get you to crash because where is he? You know, you go like this, boom, you hit the wall. Yeah. You know what I mean? So he said, don't look at the mirrors or anything, you know.
So how much did you have to, suck to slow down? Or was it blow?
Go. You get to go.
But that'll really break
yeah,
you, huh?
Break, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I want to make sure I didn't want to hit him either, you know.
That's a good idea. That is a great question to end our discussion on, isn't it? Well, Bobby had a special presentation for you before we began, and we have another special presentation for you. Some traditions weren't around in '69, so here to make a special presentation is Jenny Browning, CEO of the American Dairy Association.
Mario, the tradition of milk all started in 1936 with Louis Meyer requesting buttermilk of all things after the race. And in 1956, the track made an official tradition. And in 2005 is when we started engraving the quart-sized milk bottle. So that meant in 1969 there was not an engraved milk bottle. And we know that drivers really treasure this as a trophy to remember their win. And so, being a true racing legend, we wanted to present this to you. So on behalf of American Dairy Association and Indiana Dairy Farmers, here is your engraved 1969 milk bottle.
Thank you very much. It's definitely going in my trophy case for sure. And yeah, thank you. So I feel like I'm winning this race every day again. It's amazing. Thank you very much. This is very significant for sure. Thank you.
Mario is a rose, yes.
Well, you know, race drivers come and go, and it's incredible to me how a race driver the caliber of Mario Andretti has, as I've stated a couple of times in the past hour and a half, is such an ambassador to the sport of auto racing. It's obvious that he loves all kinds of racing, but it's very obvious that he loves the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the 500, and he loves you fans, and I'm sure you return the favor, don't you? Mario Andretti.